Okay, so let's dive into um, a really interesting corporate move. It's from a company you might not immediately link with Classover, the online education provider.
Right.
We're looking at a specific article detailing this announcement they made and, well, the pretty dramatic stock market reaction that followed.
Yeah, quite the reaction.
So our mission here in this deep dive is basically to unpack this. We want to get the key facts straight from the source, understand what happened, and maybe see what it signals about, the bigger picture. We'll guide you through the essentials.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is seeing a company that's, well, clearly not a crypto company making such a specific move into the space.
Exactly.
And then seeing the huge impact that had on its, traditional stock valuation, it really does show how these worlds are starting to connect.
Absolutely. So, okay, the source says Classover made the announcement back on June 2nd, and the headline grabber, they bought 6,472 SOL tokens.
That's the first big piece, yeah. The article mentions this specific purchase was worth about, what, $1.1 million at the time?
Okay.
And Classover actually called it establishing a Solana strategic reserve.
Huh. Strategic reserve.
Right. So it wasn't just like buying some crypto for the balance sheet. Using that term strategic reserve kind of suggests a deeper plan, doesn't it?
It does. Strategic reserve for an online education platform definitely makes you curious. And that wasn't the only thing, was it? There was a partnership mentioned, too.
Correct. Yeah. This purchase, this reserve, it was announced alongside a partnership with Solana Growth Ventures.
Okay, Solana Growth Ventures.
And tied into that partnership was, well, a pretty substantial financial piece. Solana Growth Ventures also issued $500 million in convertible notes.
Wow, $500 million.
Yeah. Convertible notes, they're basically financing that can potentially turn into company shares later on. So you've got this double announcement, buying SOL for reserve, and this big partnership with financing attached.
Okay, so just to recap that bit. Classover buys the SOL. They partner with a Solana entity, and that entity provides $500 million in potential future equity through these notes. That's it. Well, that's a lot happening at once.
It is a complex set of moves.
And now this is where it gets really interesting, maybe even unexpected. The market's reaction.
Oh, yeah. The reaction was immediate and strong. The article points out that Classover's stock price on NASDAQ, it just surged.
How much are we talking?
Well, on June 3rd, the day after the news broke, their stock jumped 46.5% during the day. It hit $5.45 a share.
Wow, nearly 50% in one day. Just based on this news?
Yep.
That's a massive signal from investors, isn't it? What does the source suggest that kind of reaction means?
Well, connecting the dots, the article seems to read it as reflecting this growing corporate interest in using crypto for more than just like treasury diversification.
Right.
It suggests companies, even ones like Classover that aren't crypto native, are looking at digital assets more strategically, maybe operationally. And the market, well, it seems to be really rewarding that kind of thinking.
So it's not just the crypto price itself, but the actual stock price of the traditional company making the crypto move. That's significant.
Very significant.
But this strategic reserve idea is still kind of nagging at me. Why Solana, specifically, for an online tech company? And what could that strategic use actually be? The source doesn't detail Classover's exact operational plans, does it?
No, it doesn't spell it out, so we are left guessing a bit on the how. But, you can think of possibilities that might fit the strategic label.
Like what?
Well, for an online education platform, maybe using SOL for future payment options, or maybe integrating some Web3 stuff into their learning system.
Okay.
Things like perhaps digital certificates on the blockchain, or using tokens for student rewards, maybe loyalty programs, something like that.
Interesting possibilities.
The market reacted so positively, it suggests investors saw some kind of potential value or forward-thinking angle there, even without all the details spelled out.
That makes sense. So moving beyond just holding it to potentially using the tech or the token in their actual business,
Yeah,
that feels like a much deeper step than we often see.
exactly. A much deeper integration.
This whole Classover situation, it really feels like a fascinating snapshot of how these different worlds, established industries and digital assets are finding new ways to connect.
It really does. It shows they aren't totally separate markets anymore. Moves in one can clearly ripple into the other.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap this deep dive then. We had Classover, the online education company, buying over 6,000 SOL tokens for a strategic reserve.
Right.
At the same time, they announced a partnership with Solana Growth Ventures, which involved $500 million in convertible notes.
Yep. The financing piece.
And the immediate result, their NASDAQ stock price shot up nearly 50% in a day.
A huge reaction.
So it's a pretty compelling case study, really, showing how corporations exploring digital assets, especially when there's a strategic angle or a partnership involved, can see a real tangible impact on their traditional market value.
And it definitely highlights that traditional market investors are paying very close attention now. They're watching which companies engage with crypto and maybe more importantly, how they do it.
Which kind of leads us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on after hearing about this specific case. What does it really signal when a company focused on online learning makes such a significant move into Solana and digital assets? And what questions does Classover's specific strategic reserve idea and that big market reaction raise for you about, well, the future possibilities for Web3 adoption in businesses you might think of as completely traditional?